The U.S. Navy bombs one of its own ships. 1,000 babies born drug-addicted every day. And the beginning of our special series on special people, the best of us. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. Another accident at sea today involving a U.S. Navy vessel and a U.S. Navy plane. The second in 24 hours. This time, a U.S. Navy warplane dropped a 500-pound bomb on a Navy-guided missile cruiser in the Indian Ocean. 5 U.S. sailors injured. A gaping hole in the cruiser's main deck. CBS News Defense Department correspondent David Martin is at the Pentagon. David? Well, we're having some audio difficulties. We'll get back to that story about the U.S. Navy dropping a 500-pound bomb on one of its own cruisers in the Indian Ocean after a little bit later on. Aftermath of another U.S. Navy training disaster at sea, the U.S. aircraft carrier Lexington returned to home port in Pensacola, Florida today, one day after a pilot crashed his jet trainer onto the carrier Lexington during a practice landing. It was the pilot's first landing ever on an aircraft carrier. The pilot was among 5 people killed. 17 other Navy men were injured. Well, according to a spokesman for President Bush, the ball is now in Daniel Ortega's court. The spokesman for President Bush says Mr. Bush is waiting for the next move from the Nicaraguan Sandinista leader after a weekend in which the two exchanged a volley of threats and insults, the president and Ortega. Ortega now says he will decide tomorrow whether to end the current ceasefire in Nicaragua. That is what blew up the meeting in Costa Rica over the weekend. Ortega says the U.S.-backed Contras have violated the truce. U.S. officials strongly deny it and, in effect, accuse Ortega of making a hot dog move. Wyatt Andrews has the latest from Washington.
The administration's actions amount to a campaign to discredit Daniel Ortega and his claim that he's been threatened again by the Contras. First, a senior State Department official called it unlikely that the Contras killed 17 Sandinista soldiers in an ambush earlier this month, raising the suggestion that the Sandinistas killed their own troops and then blamed it on the Contras to create the impression of a threat. The White House charged the Sandinistas have done this before, with Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater saying, "We encourage the Sandinistas to quit dressing up as Contras and luring people in villages into assassination attempts." That charge drew an immediate denial from the Sandinistas' Washington attorney.
I think Mr. Fitzwater has Halloween on the brain. I think that he's making a joke out of something that's very serious.
The administration is hoping to pressure Ortega not to cancel his 19-month-old ceasefire with the Contras and to proceed with elections in February.
The fundamental question is this: is Mr. Ortega for the electoral process or a resumption of violence?
Official Washington has been remarkably unified in denouncing Ortega's renewed threat of war as a sham.
My sense of it may be that they may be sensing some trouble in the elections and trying to create an issue.
This business about the Contras is ludicrous. There aren't that many Contras in Nicaragua, and they have no ammunition.
Despite the effort to denigrate Ortega, Mr. Bush has backed away from one of the insults he aimed at Ortega on Saturday. In Costa Rica, Mr. Bush repeatedly called Ortega that little man. Today he said he meant Ortega's small-mindedness, not his size. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, the White House.
And now we're going to go back to the Pentagon to see if we can get the audio from David Martin, who will tell us what happened today with the Navy dropping a bomb on one of its own ships. David?
Dan, this was very nearly a disaster. If the circumstances had been only slightly different, there could have been a major loss of life. It happened near the island of Diego Garcia when an F-18 from the carrier Midway dropped its payload on the guided missile cruiser Reeves. The bomb detonated near the bow of the ship, blowing a 5-foot hole in the deck, knocking off the ship's anchor and shattering all the windows on the bridge. Incredibly, only 5 sailors were slightly injured. Apparently, what happened is that the pilot was practicing a nighttime bombing run, and in the darkness, he mistook his target and went for the Reeves instead. He is now being debriefed so that we can understand exactly what happened. What saved the Reeves was the fact that the bomb was set to go off on impact so that it detonated the second it struck the deck. Had that bomb gone below decks and gone off, there would have been major damage to the Reeves and major loss of life.
David Martin at the Pentagon. More proof today and no further proof was really needed, of the pain and misery on the user end of the drug pipeline in this country. CBS News medical correspondent Susan Spencer reports on testimony to Congress about pregnant women on drugs, wanting treatment and fearing prosecution.
Adair was a heavy cocaine user for 4 years. Her first child, Crystal, was taken away from her. But she was 6 weeks into her second pregnancy before she sought help.
So I could be clean, so I could get my girl back. And at the same time, I could cry my heart out to these people here and tell them about how bad I felt using drugs with this one.
But as a congressional panel heard this morning, despite the stepped-up war on drugs, addicts who get pregnant often can't get help, even when they desperately want it.
All the programs say we can't take them if they're pregnant, or we can't take them till their babies are 3, and it just won't work. There's no place to send them.
They wouldn't accept me because I was having a baby. So therefore, due to the fact that I couldn't get into a program to get help, I wind up doing the same thing over and over.
The consequences are staggering. Roughly 11% of the babies born in this country today reportedly are born addicted. That works out to about 1,000 a day. Treatment centers, the experts say, are largely geared to men, not women, much less pregnant women, for whom withdrawal can be medically tricky. More than half the centers in New York City will not help pregnant addicts. But even when centers do, women sometimes stay away out of fear. Several states have started prosecuting mothers who have delivered addicted babies. Witnesses today said that's a bad idea.
And it doesn't matter if we have a treatment program on every corner. Unless we change our attitudes about prosecuting these women, they'll be afraid to seek treatment.
And others warned, unless we change attitudes about drug treatment and pregnancy, a whole generation of children will stay at risk. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Washington.
And still to come on your CBS Evening News, a violent demonstration in Moscow, the other news of the day, and our special series on Americans who spend their lives making other lives better. People who are among the best of us. More mixed signals from the Soviet bloc tonight as old-line communist regimes face growing movements for democracy. In Czechoslovakia, the official press said 150 people would be prosecuted for taking part in yesterday's anti-government rally in Prague. Police broke up that rally with clubs. Above Czechoslovakia in East Germany, police tonight stood aside as hundreds of thousands of people demonstrated for democracy in what has become a Monday night ritual. Up to 300,000 massed in the streets of Leipzig, calling for free elections and legalization of opposition groups. This on the eve of a visit to Moscow by the new East German party leader, Egon Krenz. In Moscow, about 1,000 people held a vigil outside the headquarters of the KGB in memory of victims of Stalinist terror. That protest was peaceful, but later a group of young protesters broke off and ranged through the Moscow city streets, fighting running battles with riot police. About a dozen were arrested. Witnesses said it was the toughest Moscow police action against demonstrators in more than a year. Mikhail Gorbachev has also unveiled some tough new economic measures in a desperate effort to bring the Soviet Union into the world economic system. Barry Peterson has that story.
There were extra police today at the one office in Moscow where Soviets can legally change their rubles into foreign currency for trips abroad. People are desperate to change money before Wednesday, when every precious dollar or British pound or French franc will cost 10 times as much. At the new rate, she says, I won't be able to take my trip. And how long has he been waiting already?
1 week.
Devaluing the ruble for Soviets going abroad and foreigners coming here is the latest effort to keep this country's currency from collapsing. At the old rate, the ruble was $1.60. At the new rate, a ruble is worth 16 cents. The move is an effort to shut down black market trading where a ruble is worth a dime. It's also a step in Mikhail Gorbachev's push to change the ruble. It's currently worthless outside Soviet borders. And for decades, it's been valued at an artificially high rate within the country. Before world markets and businessmen will accept the ruble, it may have to be devalued even more. The fear of devaluation is sending Soviets scurrying to buy jewelry, antiques, to hold anything but their own currency. Stores that had gold for sale, the most precious commodity, are sold out. And Soviet television is showing police cracking down on salesmen of that second most precious commodity, the American greenback. Even the counterfeiters have given up on the ruble and are making 5s and 50s and finding it easy to sell them despite the fact that it's against the law for a Soviet citizen to possess foreign currency. At the Bolshoi Theater, the music is Russian and so are the stars, but the scalpers, with hard-to-get tickets to popular performances, sing anything but a Russian tune. They now charge their Soviet and foreign customers alike in dollars. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Moscow.
In Beijing, China tonight, Richard Nixon called for renewed cooperation between the United States and China in spite of what he called differences over China's crackdown on dissent. In a banquet toast to Premier Li Peng, Mr. Nixon said the two nations should return to the formula he proposed on his first trip to China in 1972, acknowledging differences but pursuing what the former president calls common interests.
You're up.
I'm sleeping.
You were walking.
A crowd estimated at more than 4,000 today rallied in Oakland to celebrate the hometown athletics sweep of the San Francisco Giants in baseball's World Series. That may seem to be a small turnout and not much of a story, but this World Series was overshadowed by the tragedy of the disastrous Northern California earthquake. And now correspondent John Blackstone reports some survivors of the quake are facing unexpected complications in trying to rebuild their lives.
As victims of the earthquake search among the ruins, they are learning to look for titles, deeds, and financial records. People seeking help from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, are discovering the government's appetite for paperwork and documentation is little diminished by disaster.
They don't give you a check today. It's gonna be a while.
For Rick Sanguinetti, maybe 6 months. Cynthia and Hammy Promoto run an auto repair shop closed indefinitely by earthquake damage.
In the meantime, we don't have any income, and then we thought by getting this loan, it's going to help us just to pay for all these overheads and everything for the business.
But apparently we have to wait for a few months.
FEMA officials say it's the job of organizations like the Red Cross to give immediate help with few questions asked. In spite of its name, the Emergency Management Agency's task is different.
It's not designed to deal with the emergency needs or even the first few weeks of need. It's our programs are designed to get people going on the recovery stage.
We're passing among you with a bucket to collect money for the earthquake survivors.
Helping quake victims was one theme of a rally today for the World Series winning Oakland A's. The team arrived by boat. There was no parade because so many buildings in downtown Oakland are damaged.
We got the trophy, San Francisco, the Oakland Bay Area. Woo!
At the collapsed 880 freeway in Oakland today, there was a reminder of another victory. The car in which freeway survivor Buck Helm was trapped for almost 4 days was pulled out of the concrete wreckage. Helm remains in serious condition in an Oakland hospital. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
Washington, a test today, a new test case of the new federal law against desecrating the U.S. flag, right on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. Police arrested 4 people for flag burning. One of the 4 arrested is Joey Johnson. His flag burning in 1984 resulted in a U.S. Supreme Court ruling last June that flag desecration is a constitutional form of protest. Inside the Supreme Court today, arguments in a new test case involving school desegregation. CBS News law correspondent Rita Braper reports on the clash over a federal judge's power to lower racial barriers by raising taxes.
Kalima Jenkins has a dream, a really great school.
Computers and science labs, math teachers, good math teachers.
But today, the U.S. Supreme Court is grappling with the question of how that dream should be paid for. In 1977, Jenkins' family sued the Kansas City School District in the state of Missouri, charging deliberate school segregation, and won. A federal judge found that even after the school district stopped separating races, it continued to encourage segregation by allowing schools to deteriorate so badly that affluent whites fled the system.
The buildings reeked of urine. You could smell them. They were unhealthy, unsafe places to educate children.
So the judge ordered the state and the school district to start making massive improvements in all facilities, creating a magnet system to pull whites back in and give minority students a superior education.
It's a sort of a cross between a microorganism and an organism, isn't it?
Most schools will specialize in a particular subject. This one features environmental science. Price tag for the plan, $200 million.
When Kansas City said it couldn't come up with the money to pay for all of this, the judge ordered the school district to double its property taxes. And that set off a major constitutional confrontation.
The question is whether a federal judge, in his inherent powers, can order taxes. And we say that power is not there.
The attorney for the state argued today that the judge's order amounted to taxation without representation. Justice O'Connor demanded to know whether that principle should be upheld, even if there is no other alternative to desegregation. That would be our position, the attorney responded. But the lawyer for the school district argued that the judge had no choice but to order new taxes when local lawmakers refused to correct a constitutional violation.
We had to make a decision whether to respect the rights of the children or to respect the rights of the adults, and he chose the children.
Kalima Jenkins School has not been improved yet, but others have benefited from the case her family brought.
At my other school, we didn't even have a science book to learn from.
I got white friends. I even got a friend from Thailand, and we all play together and have fun.
The question now before the Supreme Court, how far can federal judges go to right constitutional violations? Rita Braver, CBS News, Kansas City.
The Justice Department announced today that Boeing aircraft will pay $11 million to the U.S. government, this to settle accusations that Boeing overcharged the government for KC-135 U.S. Air Force aerial tankers used for mid-air refueling of U.S. strategic bombers and reconnaissance planes. The best of us. 5 anonymous Americans, not celebrities, but people who might be your neighbor or working at the next desk. The best of us don't just deplore poverty and injustice and illness, they fight it. Tonight, a look at the first of those 5 representatives of the faceless foot soldier who wins the battles, in peace as in war. Just think what this country could be if more of the rest of us were more like the best of us.
Why would you guys be here tonight? Aren't you concerned about violence out here?
I don't care.
I don't get it. Why not?
Well, if it happens, it happens. If it don't happen, who gives a damn anyway? I just don't care.
If there were housing available, would you be interested in that instead of the shelter?
You can't afford rent in this town.
Well, we're going to do what we can to make it better.
Making it better is one of Rich Ring's major obsessions.
People in this country, even in this day and age of no new taxes, truly want to see homeless people helped. These are individual human beings. They're people that have a name, they're people that have a personality, they're people that have needs, and they are also people that, if given the opportunity, can make dramatic changes in their lives.
Whenever he can, Richard Ring goes to the ball game to root for his beloved Boston Red Sox. Once he dreamed of playing for them. But instead of a ball player, Rich Ring became an innkeeper, proprietor of one of Boston's most extraordinary establishments, the Pine Street Inn. You don't need a reservation here. Being homeless is enough to get you in.
Thank you.
Rich Ring has been working his magic around here for almost 20 years. Under his leadership, Pine Street has grown and changed direction. It's still the place to go in Boston if you're down and out, and if all you need is a bed, a hot meal, and no questions asked.
So we're going to use this as the main entrance once it's set up?
Yeah, this will be the main entrance.
But Rich Ring has taken Pine Street beyond emergency shelter into permanent, affordable housing for the homeless. The Inn's most ambitious project, converting a former public school building into 45 single rooms for homeless people.
We know that people, if given a chance and given a little bit of support, can definitely make their way out of homelessness.
Take a man named Roosevelt Boyd, for instance. One of the lost and forgotten people, Roosevelt gets shelter at the Pine Street Inn, but he's a perfect candidate for a different kind of housing.
He would like to be able to find a house that he could live in and have a home-cooked meal and a bed at night.
Every morning, Roosevelt leaves Pine Street and walks to a nearby park where he spends the day aimlessly sitting on a park bench.
He does have psych problems, like many of our guests.
Roosevelt is grateful to Pine Street.
It takes me in. It takes me in.
But he and many others like him deserve something better than refuge in a homeless shelter.
People should only be here for a while, and people should then be back in the community, in nice housing.
Frank.
Like the house on Half Moon Street that Pine Street bought 2 years ago for $125,000. This is Charlie, and Frank, and Tom.
Yes, hi.
They are among 11 people living here. Like Roosevelt, they were all homeless once, all former residents of the Pine Street Inn.
Thank God for the housing. It helped me a lot. It gives me a new lease on life, give me a chance to get back into the mainstream.
Where is the federal government support here?
The truth is that they've been absent for the better part of this decade in dealing with the problem.
Richard Ring could have chosen any path. He had options in life. But he decided early in his career to devote himself to helping homeless people.
And that there's a great sense of fulfillment to give something back to the community, to people who can use that help. Ultimately, it's an enriching experience.
It's the weekly serenade by the Pine Street staff and volunteers. Rich Ring believes that there has to be a new attitude in America toward the homeless, with low-cost, permanent housing available to those in need.
Unless the direction changes, more and more people are going to be homeless. People's brothers and sisters and children are going to become homeless. And when it begins to reach deeper and deeper into middle-class America, as it has been reaching, people are going to act on it.
Richard Ring of Boston. One of the best of us and part of our world tonight. Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Smith.
And I'm Kathleen Sullivan. Tomorrow, Women and Money, how to make it, how to spend it, how to save it.
Women and Money, tomorrow and all week on CBS This Morning.
This is CBS.